Happy Labor Day. Thanks for tuning in. I'm CKPG's Ethan Reddy.
I'm Kyle Sampson from Pacific Western Brewing, and we're excited to welcome you here to our brewery, give you a tour around, a behind-the-scenes look of how we make our beer, and introduce you to a few of our staff here at the brewery as well.
Labor Day is an annual holiday to celebrate the achievements of workers. The day has its origins in the labor union movement, specifically the 8-hour workday, which advocated 8 hours for work, 8 hours for recreation, and 8 hours for rest. Yet, here at Pacific Western Brewing in Prince George, a historical gem for the community, it's an impressive environment to work in, where one could argue that work and recreation might just get brewed together. We hop right into the brewery itself to not only see what goes into making a delicious beer, but also meet the people behind that crisp taste as well.
Do you ever get tired of the taste?
Who gets tired of breathing, right?
Meet Michael Schlick. He's been at PWB for the past 38 years, and much like his German heritage, he knows a thing or two about brewing and what it takes to first start making a good beer.
Well, of course, you start with your grains. That's the main thing. You're roughly using about 6 tons of malted barley, spring water, and hops. Those are the basic ingredients of making your beer, right? This is before fermentation. Then yeast and air get added, and then you have your start of a fermentation.
The brewhouse lead hand shows us the silos of the brewery that house the raw ingredients that kick off the entire process. 100% of Pacific Western Brewing products are manufactured, brewed, packaged, and shipped right here at the Prince George Brewery.
The process, so we do normally 2 brews a day.
From the silos, the ingredients head inside to the malt masher, fine grinding each grain down to a workable mulch. PWB is constantly analyzing the performance of their brewery, evident in the malt mill, as Schlick explains.
We want to know how efficient the malt mill is actually running. Are we getting the most out of our grains? So what we do is a pre-weighed sample will be poured in here, goes on a shaker for roughly how long, Rachel? What do we?
10 minutes.
10 minutes. And then what we do is we measure all the retaining material in every one of these levels, weigh them, and then we can analyze how efficient our malt mill is actually extracting or grinding our grains to get the most efficient grinds. And from that analysis, we can make adjustments to the malt mill. So you will have to watch it. You're constantly kind of adjusting your steam levels as a brewer.
Those ground up grains then proceed through the brewery's lauter tun before reaching the kettle, boiled up to a temperature of 2,000 degrees, being gradually filtered along the way as it then makes its way to the fermentation process. Once fermented, the beer then gets stored and aged before the final and most precise filtration it's been put through.
From the storage tanks, we go next to filtration, which is my work area. This is called a DE filter, diatomaceous earth. It's a really fine silicate sand. What we have in here are plates with screens. So at the beginning of the day, I take what is called a filter slurry. I deposit it onto the screens. And then once the liquid, the water clears up in the side glass and I know that all my powder is on the screens, I'm ready to filter for the day. I bring in the beer and then add more filter media into my slurry tank, and then through this pump, I'm constantly adding the fine silicate mixture into the beer stream, which is then caught on the screen, and that's what filters your impurities, yeast particles, little bits of leftover particulates from the fermentation process get caught onto the screen, and crystal clear beer will be coming out of this end if everything is running fine.
So this is the end result that you're aiming for?
That's the end result. You want a really nice clear brew out of this.
From here, I'm only assuming that is the finished product.
Yeah, coming out of the machine.
So from here, now where do we go in the brewery?
So now you're going to what's called the bright tanks or the finishing tanks, and from there you're going into packaging.
Stay with us as beer meets can at Pacific Western Brewing after the break.
We're now joined here with Rachel.
Hi.
I mean, the beer is now essentially ready for packaging, but it's now in storage. So kind of where does, and this is kind of your spot here in the brewery. So tell me a little bit about your job. What's exactly going on right now?
So I work in quality assurance, and what we do is the filtermen will polish the beer, clarify it, make it nice and bright. So then they transfer it to a bright vessel, and quality control takes over, and we do all of the checks that say the color is good, the alcohol is good, the clarity is good, and then we can sign that off for the filtermen, and then they're done. And so after that, when that process is finished, we end up carbonating the beer to its certain specification, and then we can pitch it to the filler, and they're allowed to draw off the tank and put it into cans.
And now we're in arguably the coldest room here in the brewery. So what exactly, why is this room so cold?
The beer is definitely storage temperature, nice and cold is the best for the beer. But the turnaround rate in here is still pretty quick. But we definitely want the CO2 to stay in solution, so the temperature of the beer should stay cold. Otherwise, crazy things happen. So we want to put the beer in cold to the cans. Everybody likes a cold beer on a summer day, so it's the same principle. It tastes the best.
A brew of beer is stored in one of the brewery's bright tanks for a couple of days at most. PWB's ability to brew to demand allows beer to quickly move through the facility. But before the beer can be canned, it needs to be tasted.
The last test before it reaches the can is to taste the beer and make sure that it is quality approved.
And so you just do that right here, right?
So we'll take a sample off the tank, and I'll actually take it up to my manager, and we have a panel to taste test it. It has to meet all these different requirements for clarity, smoothness, body, all of that. It is actually approved and stamped off before it reaches the can for the customer.
Awesome. Can you do that right now for us?
Sure. So that'll settle out, and you have a beautiful head and a beautiful clear beer.
While the beer is being stored in the bright tanks, there's a sight to be seen on the other side of the brewery.
This is where kind of the canning process really starts, is we're on the depalletizer. We take full pallets of cans, empty cans that we get from a supplier, and then we deconstruct the pallet here and form them on the line that's running above us over here. And we'll send these all towards the filler, can after can after can, just hundreds of cans going by.
And every single can that we see right here is empty.
That's right, yeah. This is kind of our storage warehouse area for empty can products, empty trays, all of that, incoming packaging materials. Yeah.
And then basically, how does it go from being on all these pallets to then, I mean, going through the whole cycle of being canned?
So we will take pallets over here, and we will feed them up in an elevator, and it'll just take them off layer by layer by layer and sweep them towards the line. And then we have this massive conveyor line here that'll just feed them all towards the filler. And then by the filler, it'll capture it and start canning the actual liquid.
PWB used to have a bottle line as well, but over time, consumers have made it evident that the art and science of canning beer is where the demand is. So PWB is sticking to the tried and true in the typical 355 ml and 473 milliliter cans.
We're pumping out 355s and 473s like nobody's business.
And in a typical day, how many cans of beer are being canned here?
Oh my gosh, one tank, the tank I showed you earlier, that big bright vessel, that just does over 100,000 by itself, and we'll do 2 or 3 of those a day. Yeah. It's a lot of beer. It's really something to see, yeah.
From the depalletizer, the cans get whisked away towards the most precise piece of equipment in the entire brewery, and it's truly a sight to see.
This up here is the rest of the line right before the filler, and this is a rinsing station. where the cans get flipped upside down, rinsed with water, ozonated water, and then come out. They drain and they get sent towards the filler. And it's just about to start up again here. So the twist is very precise, not to leave any water left in the cans. And they get shot into the filler at about, our minimum run speed is 500 cans per minute. We can get up to 1,000, but our best run is actually about 550. That gets us our most precise fills and run time with all the equipment at the back end.
This is where the beer goes in, it's where the CO2 gets blown through,
Yep.
and essentially the lid gets sealed on.
That's right, all within split seconds of 500 of them a minute. Yeah. So we just had a down can. The filler knows when a can is not in the right position. It stops itself. An operator comes in, pushes the reset button, and off it goes again. So we can actually get a better view on the other side here. So the empty cans will come in. They'll get fed into the filler. There's about 88 valves, I think, on the filler. So at one time, there's 88 beer going through all at the same time. And it'll just spin around and spit them out nice and full. The filler is smart enough to do a CO2 purge of the can and then fill the can to 355 mils or the 473 and then spit it out with seconds, just seconds. So at this point, there'll be a tiny machine here that dusts the top of the can with CO2 as well. Yep. It gets rid of any trapped air that might happen between the beer layer and the lid. And so it'll just quickly spurt it with CO2, and then the lid comes down on top and seals the whole thing. So we're constantly trying to figure out ways to get rid of air in the beer because that is the enemy of beer. The shelf life is better with less air.
Gotcha. And now another thing, I mean, I don't know whether this perhaps played into it, but canning beer actually preserves the beer much better than being in bottles. Is that right?
It's about the same, actually. You're gonna get people that swear a bottle tastes better than a beer, but it's really the same process. The preserving is more of the pasteurization of the beer and the amount of air that you can get out of it.
When Eat, Sleep, and Brew returns, we get to know Rachel Beppel, an employee of 6 years and a UNBC chemistry grad. And then it's time to send the beer off to the pasteurizer. Welcome back. Rachel Beppel has been showing us around the packing plant at Pacific Western Brewing. Shortly after graduating from UNBC with a bachelor's in science, she landed a job working inside the labs of PWB. The quality assurance lead hand tells us what a typical shift would look for her.
We work the entire brewery. We check everything from the malts down to the packaging. You know, we have tests for everything. So day to day, we have different stations. We have a quality personnel in the brew house to do all the brew house kinds of checks. Then we have a bottle shop worker as well. So if you're working in the bottle shop, we do checks on the CO2 in the beer, the CO2 in the tanks. We do taste testing. We do quality checks on the filler and cleaning, and also the packaging material. There's just so many pasteurization units. Like, the day is full, and we're constantly rotating through all of our tests as well. So we'll do them multiple times a day for every type of different material that we make, and that's just the bottle shop.
Needless to say, she does a lot and knows a lot as she takes us back to the packing plant, where it's time to now seal in that delicious beer.
What exactly is happening when you put the lid on? How does it become sealed?
So there's these rollers. There's like the tiniest little flange almost on the top of the can, and it's just this tiny bit of excess metal on the body of the can itself. And then the same with the lid. And the lid feeder is actually behind you here, and it's just feeding the lids down into the seamer. And what'll happen is the rollers inside will start a first operation roll is what we call it. So there's a bunch of specifications for that. and it'll start by rolling the two pieces of metal together. And then the second operation of rollers will come in and like squish the two together to be totally flat for what you typically see on a can.
And that's all happening in fractions of seconds, mere moments after each can has been filled. After that, then it's time for a shower.
Keeps everything afterwards nice and clean. And the best part about the shower is that if something were to happen on the line, create punctures or something, we know for sure that it's leaking and we'll be able to see like a foaming pan down the line. So that's easy enough to spot afterwards because we know they're all washed off immediately afterwards. And then they'll go through another check. This is one of our quality checks on the fills. So although the filler is very precise, it does happen where a short fill will accidentally sneak through the filler. And so it might be 350 mils instead of the 355. But this is a piece of equipment that will check the fill level and actually kick out and reject the can if it doesn't meet the qualification.
Once rinsed, the beer now heads to what will be the longest portion of its trip along the packing line. The beer will then go down the line and head into the pasteurizer. Streams of water will heat up the interior temperature of the can in order to cure any contamination that may still be present in the beer before being cooled off as it makes its way out of the pasteurizer. Once complete there, the cans then get packaged by either going through the brewery's multi-packer, which could cover 12, 15, 20, and 24 cases, or go through what is called the high cone, which is for the 4, 6, and 8 packs.
So basically from point A of that empty can coming and that lid coming in, how long does it take to get to this point?
The longest point is the pasteurizer at about 45 minutes. So within 46 minutes, that beer is done.
The only thing left to do is for the beer to then be sent up to the palletizer, where it's then arranged and stacked on pallets before being wrapped, and then stored in the warehouse, awaiting to be shipped out. Cheryl Metcalf has worked at the brewery for 13 years and works as the shipper and receiver in the warehouse.
Our job here is once it comes off the line, it's brought into the warehouse and put into the inventory, and it's counted. And after it's counted, I let management know, and they let the brew house know. Management all knows what we have in inventory, and they know what we can ship, and they know what they can order for empty cans and materials in general.
And now, as soon as it's here, it's a quick turnaround, right?
Very quick, yeah. Usually it's not here more than 2-3 days. It looks full, but it goes fast.
And not before long, there it is. A can of beer brewed right here at Pacific Western Brewing, just waiting to be picked up and hauled back home to be enjoyed. When we return to eat, sleep, and brew, we hear from those we met along the way at the brewery and hear what it's like to work at PWB. Welcome back. We took you through from start to finish of what goes into making a can of beer at Pacific Western Brewing. But now, in Labor Day fashion, we hear from those we met along the way and hear what they enjoy at PWB. We start with Michael Schlick. He's been at the brewery for 38 years, working in all sorts of positions along the way, and even was around when PWB went Hollywood and took us back to an iconic location.
Tank 19, really quite famous in the movie Strange Brews. They actually built the false front on this tank for the scene of the cops floating around in the beer, and this is the tank that they used for the movie.
Stand back, this is really gonna blow. Didn't blow. Anybody home?
I can't believe it, he drank it all. Help me out.
And I mean, you were here for that. So
Yeah.
how did the brewery look then? Having kind of cameras and
It was chaos, right? I mean, a lot of bubbly people, eccentric people running around, cables everywhere, lights, Dave Thomas, Rick Moranis. It was just kind of a neat atmosphere, right? And it slowed everything down, but we didn't care. We got Hollywood here, so who cares if the brewery stops for a day or so? It was neat.
Get out of the way, get out of the way! He's gonna take a leak. Get out of the way.
Hey, get me out of here, will ya? I got a weed to throw.
And now you say that you've got the best job in the whole brewery.
Well, it's consistently cool. I drink beer, and yeah, it's a great job, right? It's every day is different.
And so your job is one of few jobs where you're actually allowed to drink.
Yeah, sample. Not
And while Michael may be a seasoned vet, it doesn't take long to realize the incredible work environment that's present inside the brewery.
It's funny, when I started at the brewery, I realized that it had been around since 1957. It was a long-running business, but it wasn't until I was a few months into the job that I really realized what that meant. It meant that we have people who had worked here for, 50 years with some of us, as you talk to Michael for 38 years, and Cheryl for 13 years, and then Rachel for 6 years. Like, it's a really interesting to see the different folks who have worked here and for how long, but when people come to work here, it's often for their whole career. It's a decision to come and work for Pacific Western Brewing and then stay here. And I think that's a testament to how much they enjoy working for the company, and also a testament to who we are in the community and who we are as an employer in Prince George.
With 50 million cans of product being shipped out annually across British Columbia, Alberta, and even Japan, the brewery along the Nechako knows where its roots lie. And it's that community connection that so many who call PWB their employer are proud of.
It's very special. I mean, I started here 23 years ago, and so I've grown up in this brewery, and I've watched everybody and this whole plant diversify through difficult times and good times, and I'm really happy to be here to continue that for the next few years.
And let's just take a moment to be honest with ourselves. It seems like a pretty sweet job to have.
Everybody always asks, do you get to taste the beer? And so it's got to be the number one answer. It's the coolest to work in a brewery, make beer, and be able to come in and taste your way through the day.
With all that tasting after a long day, do you still crack open a cold one when you get home?
Absolutely, yeah. There's nothing like a cold beer after work, especially when you know you made it.
And to that, a toast to Prince George's very own, where they eat, sleep, and brew.